What is your "the whole class got in trouble" story? Story 1. I spent a semester in a wilderness outdoor education program in Arizona or New Mexico. A section of it was spent canoeing the Rio Grande River. At one of our campsites, there were the deep holes that had been dug into the ground, on the large boulders adjacent to the river, straight into the rock face, about a foot deep. These, as we'd come to learn, were remnants of the native peoples who made and used these holes for grinding, etc. So, the next morning, we all awake to the shouting of an instructor demanding we all convene for an emergency meeting. Turns out someone had crap into one of the holes. I specifically remember the instructor saying, "You are now officially the group that crap on artifacts." For your information, we're carting a latrine with us on this journey, so no one ought to be crapping anywhere else, much less into an artifact. The group of us, all 18 to 24, are then interrogated while seated in a circle, each of us asked individually. I'm somehow the only one unable to contain their laughter, so suddenly I'm being eyed down as a prime suspect, pegged as malicious crap. But the culprit came forward, blubbering, claiming ignorance in his defense. He was then forced to clean his semi-liquid crap out of the hole. Story 2. When I was in 8th grade, our science teacher had the idea to switch all our chairs out with yoga balls. That was her first mistake. We get to class, and we see she has an experiment out in the middle of the class that she has been working on for a week. Well, she had to walk out for a while and left us unsupervised 13-year-olds with medicine balls. Everyone gets up and starts slamming into each other with their medicine balls, knocking each other over. Eventually, my buddies start jousting with them, but as soon as they collide, the smaller of the two gets rammed into the experiment, knocking it over and ruining a week-long process our teacher went through. She heard the glass break run in and lost her crap screaming at us, then eventually kicking the whole class out. Story 3. In the 6th grade, our teacher left the class for the lunch period, and so we were unsupervised. I went to a private school and we had a small class of like 12 kids. Someone got the idea to roll up their aluminum wrapping from their lunch and put it in the microwave to see what would happen. 2 kids were on watch-out duty while the rest of us gathered around the microwave to see what would happen. Unfortunately, just when the sparks and smoke was beginning, our fun was cut short by an enraged elementary teacher, and we all had to write sorry letters to the principal for attempted arson. Story 4. For freshman orientation in college, our RAs told us that the opening ceremony was optional, so most of the 500-person class didn't go. The next day during our 2nd or 3rd core class, a 67-year-old tenured professor yelled at us for the first 10 minutes because she was so disappointed that none of us had gone, and that the faculty and staff had all been there, dressed in their robes for an embarrassing number of undergrads. The problem was that we weren't even close to the first class that she had yelled at. Average class sizes were 14 students, and there were 9 classes per professor. We were the 7th class this professor had had since the opening ceremony. So she had lost her voice, and decided that the only way she could yell at us was with the projector, Microsoft Word, and all caps. For 10 minutes, she typed at us, while we struggled to not laugh at the absurdity of the situation. She was visibly pissed off, because we kept smiling and snickering separately from being visibly pissed off that we hadn't gone to the ceremony. It only made it funnier. Story 5. Our school had a music storage room that held guitars and such. It wasn't a very large room. If you were a music student, you pretty much had free access to it at break times, providing you respected the equipment. One day, an art teacher was passing the music block at lunch and heard a dull thudding. So he investigated. He found at least 20 of us having a rave in the tiny storage room with a Bluetooth speaker and a strobe app. Most were not music students. We were all banned permanently. It was pretty awesome, though. Story 6. 8th grade Latin class with a brand new fresh-out-of-school teacher. We were his first class. He was not prepared. It built slowly over time, but basically this guy expected to be teaching mature, semi-college students who were passionate about a classic language. What he got was 25, 13, or 14-year-olds who didn't give a damn about a language, and were only here to try and knock out a high school requirement early. One particular day, we had taken a quiz. The answers to the quiz were still on the board from the day before. He didn't notice until 2/3 of the class had turned it in. He got mad at us. We said it was his fault. He turned beet red and screamed, "You damn kids! I'm going to go home and chug lighter fluid and swallow a match. I hate you." And he left and we never saw him again. He's not dead though. I've looked him up since then. He works for a university now. Story 7. Power went off and on, and everyone yelled when it happened every time. The teacher had a meltdown and called us screaming moths wanting the light. Another time in high school, I nearly got the whole class in trouble because of me being a dumb, mischievous kid. I used my HTC phone to turn the projector off during advisory when my coach stood in the hall. It went on for a week, and he was confused at first, but then he said for everyone to put their phones on their desk, phone on. He walked around the room as I deleted the app. He probably wasn't really looking, and he just wanted them to confess. I did not. Story 8. Not the whole class, but about two-thirds, in my electromagnetic statics and dynamics class, senior year. There was a group of Chinese students notorious in the major for cheating on everything, but got away with not getting kicked out because they were wealthy. This is about 25 students, mind you. Well, our professor was an absolute sweetheart, the nicest person you could imagine. He was out sick on the day of the final and had a lazy grad student proctor it. Now, this test was open book and open laptop because it was a really, really hard custom-written exam. Now, this professor was a bit out of touch with technology, ironically enough, and wasn't aware that messaging on laptops was a thing. These students were very clearly cheating during the exam. The proctor went out for about 15 minutes at one point, and these 25-ish students got up and started sharing papers immediately, copying between each other. Some even pulled out their phones and took pictures of each other's work. Well, several students in the class reported them all, and when we didn't see any of them at graduation 2 weeks later, we asked one of their friends, not one of the cheaters, what happened. After the test, they were kicked out of school and all of their records disposed of. Apparently, money can only buy you out of so much, as this was like the 10th or so time this had happened. Story 9. We had some assemblies for the drama club in middle school. We saw the play one grade at a time. During my grade show, a kid threw a pencil at another kid. The vice principal saw it and canceled the play halfway through. Everyone got sent back to class, and the drama club refused to put on free plays for students in the following years. The kids acting in it were so mad, they ripped down one of the curtains in the back of the stage. That vice principal was later promoted to principal of the high school my senior year. I don't know how after all the crap he pulled on people. Story 10. My freshman year of high school, the senior prank was planned so that at exactly 2 p.m., or some specific time, all the seniors would leave their classes and run and jump into the school pool. Somehow it got out, and the day the prank was supposed to happen, an announcement was made that anyone who decided to participate would be banned from walking at graduation. Come 2 p.m., all the teachers who have a free period, plus any other adult authority figure free at that time at the school, are lined up around the pool, holding hands Red Rover style. At 1:55 or so, students start trickling out of classrooms. By 2, there was a mass of around 500 seniors just standing around in a silent standoff with the line of teachers. The principal was at the front of the barricade and loudly stated once more that anyone who tried to get into the pool would be prohibited from walking at graduation. A beat of silence followed before someone shouted, "You won't?" And then the front line of students joined hands and ran through the teacher line, followed by the rest of the mass of students. I'm pretty sure some teachers got thrown into the pool from that, but no one got hurt, aside from a few bruises at getting knocked on their butts. Everyone was careful to not actually hurt anyone. It was quite a sight to see 500 kids crammed into one high school swimming pool, most of them still fully clothed. In the end, the kid who shouted, "You won't," was right, and no one got in trouble. Probably the most successful senior prank to date at my school. And in the end, I think the principal ended up joining everyone in the pool since it was his last year there. Story 11. We had a senior cut day where the whole class would just not come into school on a specific day. The day before the scheduled mass truancy, the principal makes an announcement that it wasn't sanctioned and that students would get in trouble if they didn't come in. The day comes, and less than 10 seniors show up out of about 250, mainly because they didn't have enough absences left. In other words, they were at risk of not graduating if they cut. The day after that, the principal called us 4 or 5 at a time and asked us why we were absent, and everyone in my group just said we didn't want to come in. He proceeds to say that we all needed a note from our parents saying they knew we were out. One of my group was 18 at the time and could write her own notes and literally wrote her own note in front of the principal and handed it to him. I think about 10 kids got detention because their parents didn't know they ditched, but that was the extent of it. Story 12. I wore a shirt that was only about Spunkies, extra thick vanilla milkshakes, but I was sitting so nobody could read it well. There were 6 girls behind me, and I skipped up and leaned forward. 1 minute later, the whole back half of the classroom shuts down in laughter. The girls read the whole back half of my shirt out loud to my class, which then caused more laughter. Mrs. Farley got a little mad and told me I had to go get another short, at which point somebody else said, "It's only dirty if you have a dirty mind." After all, it was just about milkshakes. The teacher looked like the whole class just mooned her. Best English class ever. I did not change out of that shirt. Story 13. So we had a chemistry teacher who did not like it if someone's phone rang during class. So what we did was we put an embarrassing ringtone on my phone, and I asked my friend to call it in the middle of the class. Now the fun part comes. We all decided that when the phone rings, we are all going to look towards the air conditioner as if the phone was above it. When the phone rang, everyone did their part exactly as they were supposed to be, and the teacher was like, "Whoever's phone this is, I am going to smash it." Teacher stood up on a desk and looked for the phone, and we all started laughing. The embarrassed teacher walked out of the class and didn't teach us for a week. Story 14. Our math teacher had constant mood swings. Sometimes she was joking around with us and sometimes just yelling at us without a particular reason. One day she was in a pretty bad mood and was explaining something to us. I don't really remember what it was. I just remember she was yelling something along the lines, "How are you going to calculate that blah blah blah?" Because no one used the proper method. Well, the one she was using apparently. I just said that since it is pretty easy, we can tell the result off the top of our heads. She got even angrier, and we immediately had to take a test without calculators, and we couldn't calculate it properly. She just wanted the answer. Since I was pretty good in maths, I got an A, grade 1 where I live, but I have no idea about the rest. We had more incidents with her, but overall everyone liked her actually. Story 15. Wasn't me, but a friend, sorry if the details are not the best. He had a substitute teacher and he stuck scissors in an outlet. Some sparks occurred. He was fine and said it was the outlet messing up. The substitute believed it. The next day, the teacher came back and a student anonymously told the teacher that somebody stuck something in the outlet, but they didn't know who, so the teacher had them write a one-page paper if the person didn't fess up. Then the teacher had another page for each 2 minutes that passed. This teacher was known for saying things but not actually doing them if people didn't say who it was and would just give up. But somebody decided to say who it was. And then my friend got in trouble, and everybody still had to do a 7-page paper. Story 16. When I was in grade 10, the popular ones were standing up and being noisy. The teacher wanted them to sit down and be quiet. She decided to keep all of us in the classroom until a few minutes after 3 p.m. We were supposed to go to our lockers and get ready to go home. She should have punished the popular ones. Not all of us. If someone ever says that she's a good teacher, they're fooling themselves. When they start treating the students poorly, I automatically call them bad teachers. Being a teacher doesn't automatically make you a good person. If you went to uni or college to become a teacher, it doesn't mean anything. You're not automatically nice just because you graduated from somewhere. They need to get their heads out of their butts. They're not all that. Story 17. I was in a choir class of roughly 150 7th graders, with half of them being rowdy boys. You had to either join choir or band in my middle school, so all the kids that didn't want to learn an instrument, aka. I have more homework, and joined the choir. Our teacher was a turtle resembling, bald, saggy naked, bushy-eared, and eyebrowed, by-the-book, 60-something moped rider who had an affinity for green sweater and turtleneck combos, and who tried to push his dream of leading an award-winning choir on U.S. disinterested 13-year-olds. One day during choir practice, we, a collective group of about 70 boys, singled out one among us, Tyler, and declared in loud singing unison, "Tyler has a mangina." Step Brothers had just come out, and this was passing for A-grade comedy. We did this for about 10 minutes, much to the dismay of Mr. Turtle, we'll call him. The next day, Tyler didn't show up to class, but the principal did. The whole lot of us was busted, and so we all marched down to and squeezed inside the principal's office to call Tyler and apologize over the phone. His mom claimed he was sick, and we were all friends with Tyler for years, so it was mended over really quick and forgiven. All in all, it was pretty funny. Story 18. My class always seemed to get the worst class in the whole school label, but it was because my school was strict and religious. and my cohort were not. So we always ended up getting in trouble for one stupid reason or another. Anyway, in year 10, we get a new science teacher. And immediately we knew that this woman should be teaching preschool, not 15-year-olds. She handed out a sheet of paper to everyone with a bunch of lines, with a spectrum going from -3 to 0 to +3. If you were good for the next 20 minutes, she'd stamp your page at +1, and again if you were good for the next 20. If you were bad, she'd put a giant black dot at -1, and so on. She also decided that the best way to get our attention was to ring a desk bell. The class ended up working all over her because she treated us like 5-year-olds, and frankly wasn't a very competent teacher and lost control of the class. She only lasted one term, and our homeroom teacher blamed us for her leaving. And honestly, we didn't really care, because we then got a proper teacher and could finally learn properly. We did feel bad because she was a nice lady but really wasn't suited for the job. Story 19. So I was sitting next to my friend in the back of the class, and the teacher asked us to buy a book for like 40 bucks. For me, it was fine. But my friend jumped and said loudly, "I can feed my whole family for only 40 bucks." Everyone laughed so hard. And this one kid, who was also sitting in the back of the class next to a wall, he started laughing too and moved his head too quickly and smashed to the wall. Then screams loudly, "Son of a..." The teacher didn't know who did it. She asked us who said it. No one said it was him. She kept threatening us. Eventually, all the class got sent to the principal because we tried to keep it a secret. The principal didn't react and immediately sent us back to the classroom. Everyone was not impressed, except for the teacher. He was nice to us because our class was the only class who visited him when he had leukemia, a blood disease. Story 20. Freshman year of high school, we had one student in the class who looked old beyond his years. Teacher was out sick. Substitute teacher walks in, and our guy is sitting on the corner of the teacher's desk, facing the class, sleeves rolled up on his button-front shirt. Tells the sub he's got the wrong classroom, and directs him to an empty room down the hall. For 3 days, that sub sat in the empty classroom alone while we enjoyed a blissful lesson-free vacation. I don't know what the sub was thinking, but we sure had a great time till our teacher returned. Come to think of it, I don't even remember if we got in trouble for aiding the subterfuge, or maybe the punishment was just eclipsed in my memory by the sheer pleasure of those 3 days of bliss. Story 21. In my math class last year, the other kids liked to play silly little pranks on the teacher to test his limits. They had a running gag of hiding the smartboard remote from him. This particular day, a group of kids decided to hide his remote on top of the clock. As they were doing so, another student ran in and told them the teacher was coming. So he got off the chair he was standing on and ran back to his seat. What he didn't know was that when he jumped down, he bumped the clock. So when the teacher walked in, he saw a tilted clock and a broken remote on the ground. For the entire class, he sat there waiting for one of us to fess up and explain what happened. He had an idea of what had happened, but he knew none of us would confess. Snitches get stitches. Half of class passed, and he decided to have us write down what happened. He eventually found out who was at fault. The next day, we had a test. His other 2 classes said the test was easy, but ours was very difficult. He made our whole class's test harder because of the whole remote situation and showed no remorse when our grades were lower than the others. Story 22. When I was in 8th grade, my friend and I, accidentally, got the whole 8th grade in trouble and made everybody miss recess. Since 8th graders were the last to eat lunch, at the end of lunch we were supposed to fold all the tables. They folded in the middle and made an upside-down V shape and put them away. Well, one day, as my friend and I were folding a table, he slipped on a sandwich bag which made him trip forward. This resulted in the bar that hooks the 2 halves of the table together just straight up, punching a baseball-sized hole in the tabletop. No one noticed right away, so we put it away. Well, the next day the janitor was furious and went off on the whole 8th grade for the entirety of lunch and recess. He was screaming about how we disrespected him and his tables, and how if it happens again, we wouldn't have recess for the rest of the year, and yada yada yada. The administration was not happy with him holding us inside during recess without their approval, and was fired. He was crap. Story 23. It was at the last day before our graduation ceremony. Everyone brought water guns with them, which in itself was okay with our principal, as long as we promised not to use them inside. The problem was that someone from another class used a water bottle to splash it at other students in the hallway. Of course, we got accused, but instead of politely arguing and proving our innocence, two of my classmates got, vocally, aggressive towards our teacher. After one of them said something along the lines of, "I don't care about you," or "If you will be at the ceremony, I couldn't care less," our teacher, who was emotionally sensitive because of her pregnancy, started crying and ran out of the class. After that, another teacher came in to inform us to back off, since nobody wanted to be in charge of our class, since it had an infamous status at our school. The two students got suspended from the ceremony, and our class wasn't allowed to show our self-written script. I don't know what it's called, but a show in a theater. Because we didn't stop them, even though we tried to. Story 24. This is something that happened recently in college. The teacher had been pissed off with us over a few classes, because the class was way too quiet. And nobody even asked doubts, and that we weren't interacting as much as an engineering class should while we were pissed off, because every time someone did ask a doubt, she would berate the student, talking about how it would take her a long time to explain the concept because of how little we know. Tensions reached its peak when students openly told her they were only sitting in class for the attendance, and she threatened to walk out if this inappropriate behavior continued. She did, and some of the students cheered and clapped as she left. Whole class ended up in the dean's office, where they threatened to make us drop the course and take it up in the summer.